Chat, what is going on, my friends? Welcome to another stream. Another green screen, not fully engaged. All professional around here from top to bottom. It is what it is. What's going on, everybody? Happy Monday. Hopefully you guys are staying warm and safe, because it is very cold in certain places in the world, including here in the United States. So for those of you that are experiencing heavy cold, please stay warm. Please stay warm. Good to see you all. It is good to see you indeed. I want to give a shout out to Albatross, Carrick, Kurgan, Dosey, Jazz and Blues, Cut Off Your Head, Jay Rickardson, DGR Dragon, Glorf, Briar, Kronzik, Black Fox, Velkinks. Good to see you. Good to see you all. Olympian, Galen, Nithier, Wolfgar, Kazik, Nightwatch MMO, BitCrunch, Mordred, Lowriser, Joskar, Kurgan, Colonel Fouts. Good to see you guys. Nup FPS. Thank you. It is a nice shirt. I agree. It's green though, so it's kind of, you can see it kind of like bubbling. You can see like the yellow at the bottom, but the this is like neon green up here, so it's, you know, struggling a little bit, but I think it still looks kind of cool to me, so we're gonna go with it. We got Spectre, Mjolnir Tech. Good to see you guys. Craft, Fringe, welcome. NutDB, VTC Pub. Good to see you. Black Lotus, welcome. Welcome, Orchidean. Welcome to you all. Tolmart, PA, Thet. Good to see you. Pygmalion, Craigfire, Remy, Gladius. Welcome to you all. 14 inches of snow overnight. Oh my goodness. That's a lot of snow. That is a lot of snow. Good grief, man. Stay safe. Stay safe. What's up, Gladius? It is going well. Top of a new week. Very busy, full week. We had our AMA, our Reddit AMA, last Friday, so we're going to talk over that a little bit with a little bit of a focus on mastery today, because there's been a lot of conversation stemming from that, which is not only understandable but expected. We intentionally kind of got that ball rolling. Also, my goodness, Nithier, thank you so much for the Prime and the 9 months of support, and for the 10 gifted subs, my friend. Thank you so much. That is amazing. That is amazing. Congrats to all of you who received from the benevolent goodness of Nithier. Thank you so much. Thank you. Truly. Woo. We can talk about it now. We can talk about it a little bit. Yeah, we're not going to go like fully into all the details. We're not going to go over every single class or anything like that. I mean more talking about some of the main things that came up from the AMA that have been being discussed since then. You guys know what I'm talking about most likely. If you don't, I will kind of go over it here momentarily. But yeah. Too early for Wind Fairthale? For me to talk about it, yeah, a little bit too early. In Texas, front door won't open. Don't like being forced to stay home, but hope everyone and you, sir, have stayed warm. We are staying warm. We are indeed. But yeah, being like stuck in your house like that, that's pretty intense because of the snow. It's crazy. Crazy. Okay, cool. And then let me also just... I had to reboot my computers right before the stream started, so I'm still getting a few things set back up here. Bear with me. Hey, one sec, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. A chilly 78 degrees today. Wow. Yeah. Hang in there, Night Air. Woo. Woo. So yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about mastery today. Kind of again, we're gonna walk through some of the conversation that's been happening on Discord in response to some of the AMA discussion. Again, we're not quite to the point where we're gonna go super deep dive into mastery yet. That is still forthcoming, and what I mean by that is like going through all the classes and talking about what their specific mastery is going to be. But we can talk about everything that we basically talked about on the AMA, which is a couple of specific things related to some specific classes, and again, just the direction of mastery in general. We can discuss that. I want to talk a little bit about Fain Death today because that's something that we want to get shored up soon, and I think that would be a great kind of back and forth, because I think, as most of you know, we're trying to capture that sense of how Fain Death functioned in EverQuest as much as we can. There's not a whole lot of like definitive documentation out there about formulas and various things. And even, we have Steve Clover here, on the team, and but it's been a long time, and memory can be fuzzy. So I thought I could start by kind of sharing with you guys a little bit about where I'm at and kind of how I understand Fain Death ultimately to work, even just compared to what we have currently. And thought we could maybe I could get some fact checkers in the chat to kind of help me where maybe my memory and research is not exactly as it should be. And then from there, we'll see where we go. We'll see where we go. But what I want to start with today is, how has the patch been so far? How's the patch been so far? I'm talking the patch from Friday. Hey, what's up, Tiglan? Yeah, no, haste does suck. I know. Let's see. Yeah, I think the I think the fire pet did already go blue. Yo, 35 stream streak. Just let me play. That's sick. Black Fox with the 10 stream streak. That's awesome, guys. Thanks so much for being here. The lighting is strange again. What's strange about the audio? Hmm. What's up, Nicodemus? Good to see you. If you're just joining in, I asked about how the most recent patch from last Friday, the hotfix patch, is going because there were a few other things that were rolled in with it. Some really nice performance improvements, some audio updates, some definitely some lighting fixes and lighting tweaks. Hey, and Nathan, thanks so much. I'm going to log in here in just a second. On Prad. Lots of really good audio improvements. Can you shed any light on why haste was disabled? So everything, just about everything we're doing right now, aside from like Nightfall Crypt and Summoner stuff, are all things that are, basically working towards the spring reset in the combat progression update. That includes, some various work that we're doing or are soon to be doing on stats, among many other things. Haste is something that we have intended to clean up and split out into melee and spell haste, respectively, much more cleanly. It's going to be coinciding with a few updates in how we handle haste systematically, in terms of essentially looking at introducing like a haste cap, and then how much of that cap is contributed from spells, how much of that towards that cap is contributed from items, and making sure that each of those have like a clean lane, so that essentially we're managing how much haste you can get from items and how much haste you can get from spells, such that when they're both combined, we're kind of living in an intended range, factoring in things like Bard haste, coming in as kind of a V2 that is meant to sit on top of that as well. So there's a lot of restructuring going on when it comes to haste and getting it, where it's able to be managed and balanced and kind of itemized properly and spelled properly. So that plus the nature, again, we ran into this a while back when we talked about, we had some of the attribute changes come in earlier last year, where, you know, we are still part of what we're doing on our way to 1.0 is also slowly, in some ways, restructuring how we handle our builds and our patches, and like, you know, how things are able to be staged and what determines whether they make it into a patch or not. And so ultimately it comes down to Haste being worked on and needing to be worked on because we need to be, you know, moving. And then, you know, us basically not being at a point where we can get it back to where it's ultimately going to land, or to get it to where it's ultimately going to land in time for this hotfix patch, which also needed to go out. So it's I mean, we try to minimize this kind of stuff as much as we can, but it's one of those things when we're still doing live patches, you know, in addition to kind of heavy development on lots of different fronts, some things end up kind of being in a less than finished state. Because once we do finish, you know, the haste changes and all that, we have to, you know, update itemization to match and things like that. So, yeah. Okay. Get ready to log in here. Outside Nightwolf Knoll. There are times it's so dark you can't see it all, worse than the Vanta Black Knight a few months ago. That, just curious, is that while it's raining or storming, or is that just nighttime? Yeah, I know, T-Chief. I know. Elevation related, that's interesting. What if there was no cap? I mean, yeah. Oh, shoulders. Man, shoulders. Back pain is the worst, guys. I'm just going to be honest. It's the worst. I'm very red. Am I very red? Why am I so red? Maybe I'm just red. You know, maybe this is my true form. Finally being seen for the first time by human eyes. Oh, I see, Cindy. Yeah, okay. Great question. The lore and the quest side of the game is something we're actively working on at the moment. Like, that's a major, like, content priority. Some of what I spend time on these development streams is actually, you know, going through and working on that specifically. The game is not intended to have like a main quest line or something that, you know, truly drives everything you do from beginning to end. Hold on, this might be really loud. Let me know if you guys feel like the game's too loud. Too loud? Okay. Let me just bring it way down for a second until we get in game. Sorry about that. Is that better for now? Let me get in game and kind of readjust audio a little bit. Sorry, guys. Surprise! Good morning. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me bring this back up on my side. And then how does this sound right now? Oh my goodness, the input. Ooh. Okay. Let me cast some spells and stuff. Do a little combat. We'll just dial this in real time. Wait, am I less red on this screen than the other screen? I feel like I got less red there. Anyway. Okay, so we're too quiet now. Any better? Okay. Okay. Maybe we'll just keep it right around there. Maybe we'll keep it right around there. So yeah, let's check this out. Let's we got nighttime, lighting, looking pretty good. We've got the tweaked undead gloom volume, which looks like that's doing what it should do. Let's check video settings. Yeah, because I always run TAA, so that's better there. Let's go to high. There we go. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with FXAA. Look at that ping. Woo! What's realistic concurrent player count you hope Pantheon achieves? You mean just like across the board or like per server? Across the board. What is a realistic concurrent player count? That's so hard to say. Game populations fluctuate so much nowadays compared to when they used to. You have so many more people playing MMOs than used to play MMOs, but a lot of people, you know, jump between MMOs and single player games. You know, I think gone are the days for a lot of people where you have just like, this is the game I play and I play only this, you know? Yo, what's up, TT? Thanks for the raid. So I don't know, that's tough to say. Yeah, I mean, with if we look at the EA box sales and we hold that up against the actual, like, you know, direct website, hold on, let me get my bearings here. I want to be able to loot these bone fragments. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't think we would have any issue maintaining a population of that size for sure. Because your concurrent's always going to be a subset of your overall sales. Like you're not going to see anything near a concurrent count just based on box sales, but based on box sales just from EA alone. Yeah, I think we are absolutely well within reason to consider a population like that easily. But yeah, you'll see a lot of nomadic behavior for sure with players, and people play MMOs for different reasons. I mean, some people play, we talked about this a little bit last time, some people play MMOs just purely for the experience of leveling up a character. They don't really have any interest in like going beyond that at max level. You know, they just want to have characters they level up, do groups with. Some people play MMOs because they love MMO PvP. And then you've got the people who, yeah, I mean, they're not nomadic. They lock in and they, you know, this becomes kind of their game and their only game for the next 5-10 years. So what does VSync feel like though? Sync one. Whoop. I mean, I kind of feel like VSync has always run pretty smooth for me. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. The game looks pretty good. Pretty good. Yo, what's up, Kickaleak? Okay, here we go. Okay. Is Visionary Realms looking to hire more Unity engineers, Unityverse people? NutDB, that's a good question. I don't know right at the moment. A healthy population per server, I would say, once the world's fully built out and there's, you know, room in the world to support it, you know, anywhere from like 2 to 3K I think would be a good size for a server. Yeah. Yeah, I too am kind of the persuasion that having one new kind of main server during EA would be really cool. I'm hoping that we can achieve that. That'd be really nice. One of the things that's improved a lot is in the last patch and some of the optimization work that's been going on is the draw distance and the render distance for things like being able to see the full city. I don't know if any of you remember, but like a lot of this stuff would have been called or not fully popped in. It'd be great to be able to see the tower from here. Actually, I wonder when you can actually see the tower pop in. Curious. I don't even know if it's set up to render. I mean, basically, what I do know is with the improvements that Kyle has been working on, we have the ability now to set certain things up specifically that we want to render from a very long distance. So being able to see that tower from down here is something that you guys should expect in a reasonably soon coming patch, because we can do that now. Oh. Well, nice. There we go. Do it again. You heard that, right? No, I put my distance up. It's too quiet. Still. Okay. Even just some narrative things here and there is better than nothing. Yeah. And you'll see an improvement in that. I mean, if you do hop in and play in and around the Throne Fast area, there's been a lot of improvements on that front. And that will continue on into AVP and beyond. Will the quest rewards have something to offer all the classes that are beneficial towards a weapon or gear upgrade, possibly for all professions too? Yes. That's another aspect we're going to be improving on as well. Quest rewards. That's because I feel like when a reward just ends up being scrapped, it takes away from the work put in to build the quest, to reward it. It takes away from the potential of it being unique. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I agree. My druid got to 20 yesterday, and I got my first horse today. Nice, Tolmar. That's awesome. Oh, yeah, Cindy, that would be sick. Why isn't the main guy in Black Rose Keep a boss the Karos guy? Well, he is. He's just not always there. That's intended to be more of a special event when he is. Whoop. Whoop. Keeping it real. Now, DB, that is the perfect question for Kyle. I don't even want to try to answer that. Days, Sean, yes, we do have plans to make Wild's End more navigable. through those exact methods, yeah. Currently, there's a lack of like smaller form POIs, a lack of more like roadways and Sword Heroth presence that emanates out enough from the city. So things like little guard stations and whatnot. But yeah, mainly like small little POIs, minor camps and things. Oh, there's a fun zoning bug. I missed it. Hopefully I'll get to see it here in a bit. Okay. I do want to check real quick. We're actually going to... I'm going to switch out of the client. I'm going to get on the... into the Unity environment now because I want to see some of the summoner updates. And then we're going to have a conversation about mastery. One second. Are there any plans to update the unit frames? My opinion is that the player frame is just so different from the target frames and they don't line up well or fit. Yes, there are plans to do exactly that. Yep. That's part of, that's all part of the spring update. More customization options? You mean for the player characters? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Ayo, nice. That's awesome to hear, Ayo. Thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. Very cool. Is balance achievable as a game concept for MMOs? Is there a point of perfection, or do you have to say, okay, this is close enough as a dev, and it's better to monitor balance, verify, and check it, making adjustments over time as players master the game? This may be the case on complicated games such as MMOs with so many moving parts. Did EQ achieve balance in your view? Thoughts? I don't think EQ achieved balance. No. Definitely not. In fact, EQ, I mean, you have to define kind of what your view of balance is. There's balance like Final Fantasy XIV, where you're talking like literal surgical balance, like absolute perfect parity. And then there's balance like World of Warcraft, where, you know, there is a heavy emphasis on balance and wanting to make sure that different roles are competitive. So there's like perfect parity balance, there's competitive balance, and then there's like what I would call like classic EQ, which I don't know that the notion of balance was like even really. I don't know when exactly that kicked in, and I want to be somewhat careful because when I was playing EQ when I was younger, and so my notion of balance and just my awareness of like other classes and competitiveness and performance and parsing and things like that was all, I didn't really think of the game in that way. But I feel like World of Warcraft is more where I remember anyway, that line of that concept of like balance, like heavy balance, like serious about balance and making sure that classes were competitive. So do I think a game can ever be perfectly balanced? I mean, yes, it can. It's all just numbers at the end of the day. So if you can balance a checkbook, you can balance a video game. There is going to be some difference between like player skill and player expression to whether that potential balance can be achieved and how often it's achieved, how easily achievable it is. You know, if it's all just a single button press, much more achievable, you know, for players at large to kind of realize that parity of balance, as opposed to like really complex rotations and movement and positioning. But where I think Pantheon will ultimately land, because of where we're kind of aiming, is in that realm of like a competitive balance, where we don't want to be in a situation, for example, where, you know, people are always wanting to bring rangers and wizards because summoners and rogues just aren't competitive DPS wise. So why bring them? You know, why would you ever want to bring that? And from the player point of view, if I'm going to decide to play a rogue because I have my kind of class fantasy and power fantasy and MMOs is playing a DPS class that is a rogue, you don't necessarily want to pick a class knowing that, you know, I'm kind of seen as a subpar version of my role, you know? So, yeah. But we're not interested in surgical balance and that perfect parity, and we're not interested in making sure that every class can do everything just as well as the other. Because there will be situations for sure where, you know, a rogue may always parse lower than a ranger on this particular fight, or a monk might always parse higher than a wizard on this particular fight because of the mechanics of the fight. Like having that flavor is also, I think, important as well. So there's a new option in here. Show in-world combat text for pets. So I want to check this out. Hey, what's up, Pelgear? Good to see you. Nice. I mean, obviously I need to fight something with a little more health. Let's move up. Move on up. The new one button in WoW makes it interesting. I like that Pantheon doesn't have too much button bloat. Hopefully the mastery system doesn't do that and add more buttons, just makes modifies existing abilities or provides passives. Yeah, I mean, there are some mastery decisions that you can make that will result in a new ability available to you. And maybe there's a, you know, more than just one. Maybe there's a couple or a handful of abilities in a particular mastery kind of path or orientation that would unlock. But also we plan to heavily kind of lean into ability modification, transforming existing abilities to do different things, passives and whatnot as well, to create kind of the overall. Forget I'm in dev mode here. I don't need to like run it on foot.
Guaranteed crit.
Boom. Wait, did that crit? No, it didn't, because I didn't have this on there. That's so nice. Like that, I mean, and I knew it. I knew it would. Having that now, man, it makes a difference in being able to feel like you're actively engaging the target through your pet. Ooh, this one's guaranteed to crit too. Bam. Okay. Okay. That felt good. Gonna stun him so I can... Woo. Got my mana missiles going now. Out of mana. Now, we have not started like doing anything related to balancing on summoner abilities. The pet abilities are meant to be much, much lower mana costs so that you can sustain it for longer during combat than the summoner's abilities. And that's why the summoner's abilities are intended to be those that you use specifically when you're wanting to burn, when you're wanting to come out of like a more sustained damage phase and focus more on like burning the target down. Did you do something with the Earth Pet or just don't want to use them? The Earth Pet is going to be a mastery path, a mastery unlock for the summoner. And if we do end up doing a fire Archimental, that will also likely be a mastery unlock for the summoner. So it won't just be the Earth Pet. But the difference with the Earth Pet, getting into the mastery discussion a little bit, is that the Earth Pet is meant to be a genuine path if you really lean into it, where you could potentially tank as a summoner through the Titan. Yo, 3-stream streak, Hellgear, nice. I want to so yeah, we want to bring, just for now, I want to bring these mana costs down quite a bit. That currently doesn't have a cost at all. Okay, curious, what's your stance on short, tall, fat, thin, short versus tall, fat versus thin, and other types of highly customizable options like that within character creation? Does this pose significant challenges in other areas like war and gear graphics? or other areas that the average gamer may not be considering from a developer perspective. It definitely does create a lot more considerations when you can have, different proportions. It doesn't necessarily, in every case, require like animation adjustments and gear weighting and skinning adjustments, but it does in a lot of cases. So I'm not necessarily ruling out the possibility of us eventually having something related to like a like a scale or a height type customization option, but that would be kind of in a later round of customization updates. The things that we want to like target first are like different facial presets, different, adding to the different hairstyles and hair colors, skin colors, eye colors, accessories, certain accessories, whether they be like body markings or other kind of like attachments. Those are the things that we're focused on first and foremost. Zakar, I'd wait to like just see how it feels, because first of all, like one of the important changes to the summoner that we're making is, the summoner is first and foremost a DPS class, and just like we've been doing with the monk, where some of the flex that the monk had into off tanking had become a little bit too built into the base class, to where they didn't feel as much like a DPS class because they, so much of their utility and various things related to off tanking was like a little bit too prominent. Same thing with the summoner. We're really trying to emphasize the fact that summoner they are a DPS class. They're meant to be a DPS class on par with rangers, wizards, monks, and rogues. Now that doesn't mean that, like a lot of classes, they don't have like significant utility and some support options to bring to the table. But just like with the monk, just like with the rogue, in other classes, those things are going to be a little bit less like just inherently baked in and like super usable and, effective right out of the gate. Like there needs to be some decision to do that. That being said, the way Mastery is set up, you're going to have plenty of additional mastery points outside of like your main goal to do things like unlock the Titan pet, to be able to use that, when you want to use it. So don't think of it as them losing that completely. Think of it being more of like, this is kind of my chosen expression where, I am unlocking the Titan and I am, using, progressing mastery a bit to make the Titan even more effective. The goal of this is to make to make these decisions and make these aspects of the class even more effective than they were previously. They do get the mana bomb, yeah. They do have mana bomb. Go and add that. Let's see. Let me first make it this. All right. Venom Bomb on there. Oh, it's dead. Will there be any masteries gated behind raid or multi-group content? Raid or multi-group content? Not likely? Would be my best answer right now. Not likely. There might be certain abilities that are gated behind raid and multi-group content. Shuriken, yes. The Undyne is still going to be the pet that you can have out alongside another main pet. Yo, what's up, Essential? I am doing well. Doing well. So, what I'm really stoked about right now is the fact that now you can see your pet activity in the floating combat text. I know not everybody's a floating combat text person, but for me, it's something I've needed. So that alone is making the experience right now of playing a summoner, engaging with the target as a summoner, feel so much better because I feel actually connected to what my pet's doing. I'm much better able to track when damage is landing, when things are happening, and it's a whole nother world. So I'm very pleased with that. The next thing we need is the ability to move this cast bar. I want to be able to see my pet's cast bar where I typically keep my cast bar. I want it to be larger like my cast bar. Ideally, I would have my cast bar right above my pet's cast bar. Because right now I've got to kind of like... So if I'm casting, this is what I see. If my pet's casting... You've got a little cast bar right there, but... Yeah. And I also, audio-wise, that's something I'm talking to Phil about soon, is like making sure that the pet's audio should be handled the same way the summoner's audio is, where it's prominent in the mix. You can see and hear very distinctly what your pet is doing at all times. So you constantly have that awareness. That'll be the next thing here that makes a really big, nice difference. So, but yeah, we're moving. We're moving, guys. Yeah, we'll make everything a toggle. Everything a toggle. As a summoner main, this is definitely looking good. Can't wait to see the armor be visible and actually do something as well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'd hoped that we could showcase that last stream, but yeah, we ended up we still gotta work that out. But it's coming. Yeah, EQ did hits really well. I have to say that. That's somewhere that, you know, they had that nice little muted kind of like boof, boof sound when you got hit normally, with a little you know, kind of a small little. But then when you got cracked, it was really nice and it was very distinct. Yes, TT. Clerics, along with all of the classes, are going to be getting a nice starting quest that progresses throughout those early levels a little bit. Yeah. Let's talk about mastery, guys. Let's talk about mastery. So, last Friday we did an AMA. Are we finally getting rid of the homeless man by the well that is so out of place? Well, are you talking about, what's his name? Are you talking about the Gathering Quest guy? I don't think he's necessarily out of place. I think it's just, yeah, not creating a whole hub through him. Last Friday. Let me pull it up. Last Friday, we did a Reddit AMA on the official Pantheon Reddit. And the question was asked, there was a question asked about mastery. I'm going to find it. I'm surprised it's not higher up. I'm pretty sure we talked about mastery at some point. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I still don't understand Reddit. I don't know how to like filter things. Like I don't understand this side of Reddit, how to filter things to see things more clearly. Maybe there's not really a way to do so. I don't know. But so anyway. Oh, and I just, yeah, I just lost my place here. Hold on. Let me find it again. Here we go. Any plans to make all classes have viable DPS and not hard locking them to one job? For example, I know warrior class is a tank, and I agree tanks should do little damage, and I'm fine with that. And I think it's the right approach. What I would like to see is that this warrior class can also be on par with other real DPS classes if it's played as a DPS. I think WoW made it right to enable all classes to be able to DPS if the spec is right. I know Pantheon does not have class specs, but I think this can be achieved with optimizing skills and abilities. Yep, VTC Pub, that's you. That's you. It's all live. It's all live. It's all real. Oh, that's funny. So, here's my response. And this response was intended to kind of get the ball rolling on this conversation and in some of our, you know, how we're designing mastery, you know, where it's ultimately going to land. So the design of the mastery system has evolved to a point where, yes, through mastery, warriors will be able to lean fully into enhancing their defensive and tank related capabilities, or lean fully into a DPS-oriented mastery expression that will allow them to perform at the level of a true DPS class while sacrificing the effectiveness of their tanking. We are approaching each class uniquely. Don't expect all non-DPS classes to have a DPS spec, but with this framework in mind, you can expect things like a heal-oriented paladin, a tank-oriented monk, a CC-oriented rogue, etc. Now, the conversations surrounding this and kind of talking through this a little bit more is what I had in mind today by listing mastery as kind of like a flagship part of the stream. And it's to make sure that, you know, we can all talk through and have a little bit of a better understanding of what we have in mind here. And I think what some of the conversation on Discord has been trending towards is kind of like a, hey, this kind of seems like something that for a while was not in the cards. And, you know, I know I personally, and people rightly have referenced that I've talked a lot about, you know, not wanting to go into this hard specking kind of approach, but always kind of looking at this soft specking approach to giving players a little bit of control over their identity and their expression in the world. Identity is not really the right word, like how they play and express their class through stats. And so if there's an aspect of your class that you wanted to emphasize, that being able to lean into this stat versus that stat was going to kind of set you up to be more effective. Now, we've also talked a lot about flexing, and I think most of you are pretty familiar with that idea, where a rogue, for example, is able to flex into that CC kind of role, where the original idea behind it was, if you do that, and I'm not really going to get into commentary right now about how effectively we've achieved this from class to class, but the idea is, okay, you can sacrifice your DPS, you can sacrifice kind of your primary role actions to flex into this other role for a temporary period of time. And with rogues, that was intended to be things like their CC, monks, their off-tanking, and, you know, certain classes into like more of a DPS role, things like that. Now, the idea with mastery is that while we still plan to support this notion of flexing, and that's still going to be a thing, you're still going to have a rogue, because a lot of the base kit between the classes, and I say a lot, meaning not all of it, but a lot of the base kit. I mean, look at Summoner as an example. One of the changes for Summoner, moving the Titan into the Mastery tree, means it's still going to be as an unlock early enough in Mastery where if the Titan pet is something that you really like and want, then it's something you'll be able to pick up relatively easily and quickly. But when we think about things like the Titan pet for the Summoner and the CC for the Rogue, and, you know, some of the damaging abilities for Warrior and, you know, Paladin healing and things like that, there are some classes that lend themselves really well to us saying, okay, if we were to take these specs, if we were to take these flex roles and allow a class to essentially really, really fully kind of embrace that, then we have opportunities to create through Mastery these really cool kind of subsets that fit a specific role, but do it in a really interesting and unique way. So that's kind of where we're at. So now the discussion can begin. I am going to go to the bathroom first, give you guys a chance to kind of process, and we'll come back. We'll dig in. Be right back. We're back. Will summoners keep summoning, or will they be more artificers that make mana gadgets? Well, it's definitely both. Like the thing that supports their arcaneering is the summoning magic. Like there's absolutely magic involved. Like when they're opening portals and creating things that didn't exist before, and summoning mana bolts through time and space and things like that, they're manipulating mana from the mana plane itself, which is where mana ghosts come from, which is what their pets are made out of. The Archimentals are mana ghosts that are these, near sentient mana creatures that are bound to arcaneered materials to kind of give them shape and form, and also bound to, either magic or an elemental property. And so they're definitely a kind of a blend between spellcaster, like true mana wielding spellcaster, and this kind of arcane engineer. Yeah. All right, let me catch up on the chat. Is some mastery still being used on general stats and skills, or will it be mastery of abilities now? It's still going to include all of those. Yeah, one important thing to remember here is that we're not talking about... you have to think of these mastery arrays as kind of like... well, actually, for one thing, if we go back to even like the mastery graphic that we put up before in the dev diary that we talked about, there's a reason why we emphasize the fact that the visual of that mastery graphic could change, the layout of that mastery graphic could change, because another one that we've been exploring is more of a radial approach. And so if you think of a radial mastery kind of window element, UI element, to me, that's a better kind of representation of the fact that when you think of a warrior is all of these things. Warrior is all of these things. Their shield play, defensiveness, damage soak, their banners and shouts, their mobility, charges, leaps, and then obviously their weapon masters. And so the idea with mastery is like, there's not this hard line between it's not like World of Warcraft where you're like, I'm going to be a fire mage and that means I'm only in this tree. It's like the culmination of these various different things. Like if you're looking for a group as a warrior and have kind of embraced that kind of fundamental warrior tank, then you're just looking for group as a tank. You're a warrior and you're a tank. And like with any, kind of spec, unlock, tree, whatever system, you're going to get, various kind of like builds, if you will, that are, more in line with being an effective tank as a warrior. And so I think it will ultimately come down to like, there is kind of this truest expression of what a warrior tank is. And that's what a warrior tank is. But when you have, for example, a warrior that wants to dual wield and is, you know, really interested in like kind of maximizing their stat contribution and their, you know, maybe a couple of different like unique abilities that they can unlock that do allow them to kind of lean into more of a damage dealer, I think that's a really cool thing to support with the mastery system while still maintaining kind of like, I mean, it's basically taking the flex rolling and making it a little bit more, like amplifying it a little bit more with, you know, the specific loss of other things in doing so. Radial tire. Well, a lot of this comes down to how easy or how difficult we make it to change. So what we're not doing is introducing like a dual spec system where you can kind of like swap back and forth between, you know, this is my tank warrior and this is my DPS warrior, and oh, we just, you know, we just lost our tank, I'm just gonna pop into my tank mode. It's not how it's gonna work. Like, we want to treat these as kind of like, can you respec? Yes, but are you going to be able to respec out in the field? No. Are you going to be able to respec like super conveniently? Probably not. Like, these are meant to be kind of, you know, and mastery's always meant to be, has always been intended to be this way, where while we don't want to completely limit somebody from being able to try something different, we want it to be something where you're having to put some time into, like, okay, you know, I have to, you know, go to a specific place and there is a specific cost associated with this, specifically to kind of build some of that weight into the decision of what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah, T-Chief, I think that's a reasonable example, yeah. When heavy plate unlocks for warriors, that is going to be associated with a passive armor proficiency, and it's very possible that that armor proficiency could be something that you unlock in mastery. So yeah. How so, Ixar? Yeah. That was funny. Undyne. Hold on. I want to make sure I'm seeing our YouTube folks as well. A full tank monk, interesting, tell me more. Well, I mean, what that allows us to do, for example, what mastery in this way allows us to do with the monk is to actually develop a potential like avoidance tank path for the monk, which would be super cool. But, you know, you're going to be sacrificing obviously quite a bit of DPS to do something like that. But the idea of having, like, within the spectrum of what a monk is in Pantheon, this idea of being able to truly kind of solidify your flex into, you know, fully kind of embracing that avoidance tank role would be really sweet. And again, this is why I was stressing earlier that we're not, when I say able, so what I said here in this post, like to perform at the level of a true DPS class, what we don't want to do is say, okay, you have this warlord branch or this warlord section in your mastery, and if you want to, you can, you know, LARP as a DPS class and go this route, and you're never going to be able to group as this or really do anything meaningful as this. But it's there just to kind of like be, hey, you know, warriors can like pretend, you know, to do damage. What instead we've decided to say, okay, if we want to open the door to embracing some of these aspects of the class and allowing players to kind of dig into and lean further into those aspects of the class, of their class, at the exclusion of some of these other things that are more kind of like mainline, then the outcome of that needs to be some degree of like legitimacy. So what I'm not saying is that a warlord warrior needs to necessarily be able to like top the DPS charts or anything like that. But what I am saying is that there needs to be some competitiveness between what a warrior who is kind of more invested in the warlord aspect of their mastery is going to be able to do in groups to make it to where it's like, so yeah, I mean, you may, you know, we'll have to kind of feel that out as we go along, but I think there's a lot more, it makes a lot more sense to go that route than it does to just, you know, yeah, you can fully invest in all of this, but you're never actually going to be able to like do damage, you know. If it's not as good, why would I take a warrior built for DPS over a pure DPS class in a group? Same with the tank monk. Yeah. No, Anthony, that's absolutely not. So there's not going to be, this is all going to be done within the framework of like the class ability kits as they are. There's not going to be, you know, warriors that can summon or cast magic or rogues that can use shields or anything like that. Yeah. Fodari, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear. I'm really glad to hear that. Rogues do use people as shields. I hadn't considered that angle, but that is correct, yes. So what other class will be able to flex into real party healing? Specifically, will the bard be able to with AoE heal songs but not tank heal? So I'm going to skirt around that question just a little bit, because until we get to the point where we're talking more fully about the bard and the bard kit, I don't want to like talk too much about the specifics of what a bard can and can't do. But we can talk about the paladin, and the paladin as an example. So, you know, I mentioned here like a healer-oriented paladin. I think there's some interesting opportunities to do some unique things with the paladin kit to allow them. And again, you've got to look at this a little bit on a spectrum, because it could be that, you know, for example, with the paladin has its tanking kit, and part of that tanking kit consists of really three main things. You've got your defensive oriented abilities and skills and passives and whatnot. You've got your offensive oriented abilities, and you've got your healing abilities. And those three things make up kind of the base paladin kit and how they tank, how they build threat, and so on. When you think of like, when you sit as a paladin and you open your mastery window and you look at your mastery array and kind of where you want to go and what you want to do as a paladin, you're going to have freedom to go in any of those directions. Are you focused mainly on your, you know, are you planning on just sword and boarding paladins? So where there's like shield oriented mastery, where there's defensive oriented mastery, defensive mitigation, defensive passives, mitigative passives, things like dodge, parry, block, things like, you know, certain defensive cooldowns that you have, whatever. Or are you going to focus on holding threat more through your offensive, like damage oriented abilities, or your healing abilities? And are you going to go for like a balance between those three things? Are you going to focus primarily on your straight up mainline tanking kind of mastery options, and then sprinkle in either more, you know, offensive abilities or healing abilities to supplement that? But then what happens when you focus purely on your healing side? And the idea is that if you go deeper and deeper into that part of the paladin aspect alone, then you get to a point where it's like, okay, there is, you know, a reasonable kind of healer-oriented outcome here that ends up becoming an interesting prospect for a paladin to pursue. And it's similar, you know, when we've had points in time. I mean, what's interesting about this is we've had periods of time where, for example, the paladin healing was and still is, but times where it was even stronger than it is now, where you had paladins genuinely healing their group. And the problem with that, though, is that you had paladins that were excellent at tanking, but also excellent at healing. And what we're looking at potentially is, okay, if you're going to end up sacrificing, if you want to have, you know, actual healing ability, it should probably come in the form of a bit more kind of, you know, give and take and offset from how well you can tank if you're interested in being more of a healer, specifically through the way the paladin does it. Oh, I think, okay, so the question of, and identity is a huge thing for me. Like, it is. Like, class identity is huge. Having clear, you know, tank, clear DPS, clear healing, clear CC, clear support, and then things like a wizard feeling like a wizard, a paladin feeling like a paladin. These things are very important to me. And I think it all comes down to the expression and making sure that. So an example I would give for the way things are right this second in Pantheon with the rogue. The rogue has a very, very strong class identity. Some people like it, some people hate it, Some people think it's mid, but it's a very strong class identity because it has a mainline, DPS expression, but then it has smoke trick, traps, poisons, all these other various things. And when a rogue is CCing, a rogue maintains its very strong identity as a rogue and the way it CCs, and it's the preparatory nature of the class and the kind of CC it can do. And when you see a good rogue CCing in Pantheon, it's really cool. And there's a lot of skill expression involved in that. So I see this as really an amplification of what is kind of already happening in those regards, where just because you see a rogue who is going to be sacrificing some of their DPS because you know what? They love this kind of tricks of the trade vibe of the rogue. They love the idea of trap setting and, these kind of like concoctions and things that allow them to CC and incorporating that with stealth and various things. And so when you see a rogue CCing, I don't think that detracts from, number one, the importance of CC as a role, and number two, specifically the way that rogues do it. And it absolutely, one of the things that WoW did that I think hurts this concept of specs is that they made it all really simple. Every class had their kind of like, if you went from like a Prot Paladin to a Ret Paladin, even though I played Ret Paladin a little bit and it was fun, it was a very simple rotation. Like it was very simple to kind of get into DPS. Whereas when you think of a rogue and a rogue's like being a good CC class in Pantheon, number one, an enchanter is going to baseline in their, CC arsenal because they are baseline a CC support class. They're going to be a much more powerful CC class and it'd be a lot easier for them to do what they do. Whereas a rogue could end up being also a very powerful CC class, but it'll be most likely in a much more difficult skill oriented way than something like an enchanter, which I think adds to some of the draw. Instead of like, okay, we have these different specs and we're going to make it really simple for you to just kind of like switch between this spec and this spec and like, you can do it out in the field and you can do it whenever you want. And we've streamlined it all and it's really simple and easy. And you kind of automatically almost go into doing it. It's like, no, like you're having to navigate like the overall arsenal that these classes have. And it's up to you really with the tools that you're given and the way that they are amplified through mastery to actually become good at doing this role. If that's what you decide to do. So I class identity is hugely important to me. I think that this direction absolutely can erode class identity and role identity and make it, I think that's on the surface, one of the concerns is like, well, now everyone can just do everything and then it just spirals from there. But that's not really what's happening here. Because like I said, this doesn't mean that every single class is going to have, this full coverage into what other things that they can do. But also it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to do or that everybody's going to like resonate with doing it. And so how many full CC rogues are you going to see? I don't know. And then even more, well, so just your average schmo, you can say that about a lot of things, right? Like if I want this specific mechanic, I can play this game and it has it, but the sum of the parts is also what matters. Like, yes, you could go get into, what you're saying is if I wanted role specking, I would just go play WoW. But you're also getting everything else that comes with playing WoW. You're not getting the specific way that mastery works in Pantheon in the context of everything else that is going on in Pantheon. Why would I want a full spec CC rogue when I could have an enchant? Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you wouldn't. And that's the point. Like, this is about the player having some freedom in some of this class expression. So while a rogue could be fully on par and capable as a dedicated CC class, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to want to do that, or that it's going to be ultimately as good, or at least as easy to be as good as an enchanter. And so, yeah, it may be that, okay, why would I want this when I can have an enchanter? And the answer is maybe you don't. But that doesn't mean that someone who plays a rogue still isn't going to want to experience that, because that's part of their specific class fantasy, or power fantasy for the class. Yeah. It's more of a niche kind of thing for the rogue to do, because it doesn't mean that the rogue who decides to forgo some of their DPS capability to gain more CC capability, it doesn't mean that they're also going to become a support class like the enchanter alongside of that. It just means that this person in particular really enjoys the CC flex of the rogue. And you have to remember too, like, some people, again, they're not interested in like raiding. They're not interested in even like, group efficiency. They're interested in playing Pantheon to explore their own class fantasy, because they may only ever solo in Pantheon, or have like a little duo or trio that they run around with, and a Tricks of the Trade rogue may be perfect for that setup for them. Yeah, I mean, a DPS, a warrior that has like gone full sail into the warlord part of their mastery would still have some, aspects of the warrior kit, taunt and certain banners and various cooldowns that are universal, meaning that they could potentially still tank, but they're not going to be, they're likely to not be using a shield. They would be missing some of the things that really empower a lot of their like shield play and things. And so, yeah, I mean, a much less effective tank, for sure. A D&D route of subclasses is what I have in my head instead of WoW specs. I think that's a much better way to look at it. Yeah, I think when we hear specs, we and I do it too. I mean, it's easy to think of WoW as kind of like the main comparison, and but I think D&D subclassing is actually probably closer in the end, for sure. Dude, Andrew, I see how you want this to go, but what will happen is the specs that aren't on par with other classes' equivalent specs will over time cause outrage from the players who chose a class who can't do the role as well. Example, rogue not CCing as good as an enchanter. And, part of what we need to do, part of, our, I don't know, like it's up to us to decide like how we will and to what degree we will respond to that. So I'll give you an example, and here's just me interacting with this system as it's developing. You guys know cleric is kind of my main. That's what I plan to main and typically main and want to main in Pantheon. And one of the things that's gotten me excited is the idea of like a smite cleric. A cleric that, is able to really, really lean into and emphasize their smites and their undead abilities. The idea of having this kind of experience as a damage dealing cleric. And that excites and interests me. And so part of how I'm viewing this is like, okay, Is me being able to be a smite cleric going to make wizards feel less than? is that going to make Rangers feel less than? Because on some level, you have to kind of carve through that group meta versus individual player fantasy. Hey, Job, I love how you challenge yourself with these chats. So what about all the UI support needed for social menus to handle speaking? How will I know who is a CC rogue? Yeah, we're talking about that too. We've talked about potentially like giving players like through how you inspect them, or maybe what you can see in like the who window, kind of like EQ did when you hit level 51 and you got that kind of new title. Like an enchanter became like an illusionist or whatever. That next to your name, you'd see like, level 50 warrior, warlord, or bastion, or commander, or whatever. That could be potentially a cool way to do it. Yeah. And even as a nameplate title, that could be cool too, yeah. Warlord Joskar. I don't think every class should have a hybrid role. Okay, well I'm gonna throw one class out there that I think would be a good example, at least as we're currently defining it and kind of developing it in its mastery sense, to give you guys like an idea of how this could go, where there's less of like a cut and dry, this is going to be switching into a completely different role. But the Ranger's a great example. So the Ranger has their melee, Ranger has their ranged, and then the whole concept of skirmishing. So for the Ranger, their mastery array could look something much more like, if you want to just be a pure stand at range and like lean into your bow as your DPS, here's a whole slew of things designed to do that, where if you don't have any interest in meleeing, you don't have any interest in skirmishing, jumping in and out, you just want to stand at range and be an archer, boom. Conversely, if you're like, I want to be, Drizzt and I want to be up close with my, dual blades, doing the whole melee ranger thing, because I love the ranger fantasy, I love track, I love all that stuff, but I love like melee DPS, then boom, here's that. And then if you want, to focus on that, if you love that skirmishing where you can be effective at both, and it gives you that much, more freedom, whatever. But then the other thing about that skirmishing tree is Rangers also have druidic magic. They have traps. They have beckons. They have, all this other utility. They have balms and tonics. They have coatings. You have this whole survivalist side of the Ranger that, is largely going. So whenever you think of that skirmishing tree, you can also think of that more as kind of the survivalist tree, where if I really want to lean into these other kind of, support, self-support, and general support and utility and other type things that the Ranger has. And so what happens if you fully focus on those things? I mean, it's not, the Ranger's not going to turn into a full CC class. They're not going to turn into a full buff class. They're not going to turn into some kind of like a druid caster DPS class. It just means that they're going to have a much broader kit, and that could end up being, something that Rangers that are, play mostly solo or things like that, maybe they tend to go that route because it gives them the broadest degree of like, different little tricks that they can have and utilities that they can have. But it's all under that Ranger umbrella. And, a lot of it really comes down to what aspects of the class are you choosing to emphasize. Yeah, and we're also, so that's a great point, T Chief, and that I'll just agree and say that as we're, you know, locking these things down, we're not saying that every class needs to have 3 either. Some classes could have 2. Mm-hmm. Crease, we do plan to have maps. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be, we're not going to have like a mini map with like a GPS system, but we do plan to have, you know, zone maps that are topographical and definitely give you a better sense of, you know, your surroundings and kind of navigation and things like that. And guys, listen, the reason that we're having these conversations, the reason that I answered the mastery question the way I did is so we could get these conversations started, is so we could have these discussions. When these things hit the PTR, we're going to be having these discussions. We're going to be reading feedback. Okay. So like, as is always, you know, I hope that you believe and see and believe that I'm interested in your feedback on these things. You know, we do have to, as a design team, we have to build this game. We have to make decisions and move forward. But it matters a lot to us what you guys think about this stuff. And sometimes gut reactions are, they prove to be really important. So, I mean, I want you to say what you think. I want you to, and you know, you don't see a lot of the discussion process that goes on internally about some of these things. And sometimes when you get to the point where you're starting to really look at landing the plane is when you start seeing things more acutely, and things that have long been just kind of like a, you know, we decided to do it this way months and months ago, or years ago in some cases. When you really get to the point where you're starting to look at landing the plane and looking at implementation and making these things real, then some things become more acute. And I mean, I have had moments throughout a lot of these discussions and deliberations and whatnot where, you know, I've kind of woken up the next morning and had like a knot in my stomach. I'm like, what are we, you know, no, like this is too far. We've gone too far, and we've walked it back a little bit. And there's been a lot of just very real, you know, kind of, there's a lot of, yeah, it's been really good though. I love how it sounds deep and gives me something to think about when it worked for my characters. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Ixar, I you know, where that parody lands is absolutely a good kind of note to sound in terms of like, yeah, a full DPS warrior, because I mean, again, what's interesting about a DPS warrior is that you, in some ways, are that unique sense of like a plate wearing weapon master that you're able to, you know, kind of embrace these more, yeah, offensive aspect of your class. Like it's cool to be able to do that. It's really cool to be able to do that. Any idea of respec or new spells? Mastery point totals. We will have a respec option. Yep. Please say the words, but not as well as a pure DPS. Will rampage tanks be a thing for Pantheon? Not planned at the moment, no. Well, the in the right hands is an important part of what you're saying there, Swag. Like, so for me to say, you know, if I'm being pressed to say, hey, so this DPS warrior is never going to be on par with like a pure DPS class, right? What I want to account for is this idea that a warrior that is fully focused on DPS through mastery with the right gear and the right player skill, I don't see an issue personally with a really, really good player being able to do as well as an average pure DPS class. An average player. Am I okay with a DPS warrior having to work harder to do that? Maybe. Because the other classes have different skills and utility. Rogues have the best armor debuff, so you want one of those in a melee. So you want one of those in a melee focused group. A monk can pull and break camps. Are you looking? Yeah. Well, and that's another great question. It's like, okay, so a CC focused rogue, a rogue that's focused more on their CC, may not actually be able to get that, best corrosive brew. That may be kind of in a different part of the mastery array that makes it difficult, to kind of go that route. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but I'm just saying like that's part of the design of the mastery, and that's part of where feedback from you guys is going to really come into play, is like how best some of these things can be positioned, either in that some things are out of reach point wise, if you want to go so far in kind of this area with your points not being able to quite get back to that other area with your points, but also through, potential kind of exclusive decisions that you make. So if I choose this unlock, this mastery node unlock, it might be mutually exclusive with two other options that once you've chosen this one, you can't choose the other two. So we can create these kind of like situations in the array. No, Magic Page, the rogue would never be able to become a viable tank. So This is very selective. If you're not super familiar with Pantheon, or if you haven't followed it for a long time, we've had this notion for a long time of flexing. The idea of flexing within a certain class. So like the Rogue, for example, is a DPS class that has been able to flex temporarily into something like a CC, be able to do some crowd control and things like that. But that's all been very specifically designed from class to class. So it's not like a Rogue could flex into CC and flex into tanking and flex into healing, or flex into like throwing, magical projectiles. But in the design of the Rogue, we've chosen specifically to allow them to flex into that CC. So Mastery is kind of carrying on that tradition where certain classes have been designed with certain kind of flex auxiliary things that they can do in mind. And Mastery is really being designed to amplify that. I got you. Yeah, Lucifer. Yep. Well, so the whole identity thing, it's a really interesting thing to break down, because when you talk about class identity, you're potentially talking about it's an issue of degrees. Like, are we talking more about class identity or role identity? More classes that can do a particular role does not, in my opinion anyway, does not dilute role identity. A tank is a tank. A healer is a healer. A DPS is a DPS. Like, role identity, I don't think is really touched by that. If you're talking class identity, then you're talking like, okay, and I understand like class and role identity kind of converge to a degree. So if you're saying like, let me just process this a little bit. Like when you think of World of Warcraft and you think of their talent trees, and then you think especially when dual speccing came into play, and you think of something like a paladin that was able to be a tank and a DPS and a healer. I don't think it disrupts class identity or even dilutes it, as long as the way that a class does a particular thing is distinct, has its own challenges, has its own approach, and its own like vibe and look and feel. So I go back to the Rogue as an example, like, and the Necro in the same way, and the Bard in the same way. So look at, okay, Enchanter, in this scenario, your main CC classes, your main CC characters in Pantheon would be something like the following. You're the Enchanter, the Necromancer, the Summoner, or I'm sorry, the Bard, Enchanter, Necromancer, Bard, and this specific kind of Rogue that you could say are all... These are the classes that could dedicatedly handle the CC role in a slice of content. The first question is, is the rogue being able to do that, does it take away from the enchanter, the necro, and the bard? And you could answer that question, you could say yes, in the degree that there's an additional player that can compete for that slot. So now, you know, the enchanter isn't just competing for group slots against a necromancer and a bard. They're competing now against, you know, a subset of rogues that have gone this route. Then you start getting into like player perception, which is who can do it best. Like, do we want an enchanter? We can bring an enchanter or a necro. Which one do we want? We can bring in a bard or a rogue. Which one do we want? And that's when you start getting into, like, are people going to choose bard more often because bard brings CC, but also a lot of these other, you know, support type things, whereas the rogue largely is just, this is just kind of like a CC type class. And you could stop at the conversation there and say, okay, yeah, like that's just the way it's going to be. You're going to have some classes, you know, enchanter and bard may kind of edge out against necromancer in a lot of cases because of their brand of support. And then all three of them are going to largely edge out the rogue in most cases because the necro still has more support options than the rogue does. So why would you ever bring a CC rogue in that case? And I think that conclusion is actually what keeps class identity intact, and there being some discrepancy between how well a role is fulfilled by a class and what the additional things that a class can do, factoring into that kind of player perception side of class identity. But when we're talking like just pure identity in terms of like how it manifests itself in the game, as long as, you know, enchanters and necros and bards and rogues are CCing in their own unique ways, with their own unique style and look and efficacy and all that, then I think I don't think it erodes class identity. What I think erodes class identity is when you start seeing effective CC just kind of sprinkled in across the board into every class's kit. That's when I think you really start to see the erosion of class identity. When every class, you know, kind of has a form of CC. When every class, you know, can effectively, like, deal damage. I'm just reading, processing here. in EQ, it was a benefit to be an enchanter. Everyone wanted me, though it became annoying when people expected me to be there. Well, it's not just that they expect you to be there, it's that an enchanter was required. Like, you had to have an enchanter to do, you know, a lot of the content in EQ. And so, you know, that's a decision we made really early on, which was, you know, again, not wanting every class to be able to fill every role, so that no matter what your group makeup was. That's honestly why we've walked back some from the technique stuff too, because the techniques had gone too far into allowing you to kind of fill gaps pretty much. You know, you could slow, you could root, you could, you know, potentially CC, stun, knock down, like all these things through techniques without having to have classes, you know, present to do that. Certain classes present to do that. So we've been one of the reasons why we've walked some things like that back, so we could make sure we're not going too far away from, like, yes, a broadened like role coverage than something like EQ, where it was like only the enchanter, but still, you know, keeping role coverage in mind and not going too far away from that. Glorf, to be completely honest with you, I am not aware of that change. Pantheon 20 plus currently requires having an enchanter, at least during early EA. We had to re-roll our group for someone to re-roll enchanter because we didn't have one initially. Yeah, and that's largely because we still have to develop out the rest of the CC kit for like the necro. I mean, right now for the necro in particular. I mean, the rogue, really good rogues are capable of some pretty awesome like CC, but you know, some of that comes with levels as well. You need enough levels, and it also takes quite a bit of skill. What are we doing on Do you think Necro CC kit will be fully or mostly fleshed out by the spring update wipe? I do. I'd be happy if Necro was just top tier solo class. Necro, I mean, I think they will be. I mean, they definitely will be able to be with, if you end up going that route. Hi, Joppa, I hope the storm didn't wreck you. Nice job on the AMA. You guys answered every single question I asked. Nice. Nice. Yeah, we've been waiting through the mastery conversation today a little bit, and kind of I know there's been a lot of like discussion about it since the AMA, so thought we'd do a little more discussing. We are going to talk about Fain Death. We're about to get to that. I'm just making sure that we're And this won't be the only conversation we have about mastery, obviously, but... Cool shirt, thank you. It is a cool shirt. You can see, this is literally see-through, this part. So the bottom part here is gold, and it's solid. But the top part, it kind of like turns into a little bit of a neon green as it goes up, which it's reading as that chroma key green. So yeah, you can see through it. It is not actually see-through. Yeah. We have been talking about that, Doug Bug, yeah. Mastery is coming in the spring, yes it is. I'm excited to try it now. It seems very difficult to describe, but I love the idea that my paladin and my wife's will feel different. Yeah. If a DPS warrior legit loses its superior survivability, then on par DPS can be equalized, but if the mastery isn't going to legit debuff all that survivability, then you just have too strong a class. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, definitely, yes. There will be some general masteries, yep, and those will be woven into the mastery tree. So little things like, you know, stat bumps or various other little general kind of more character specific things would be potential like minor mastery nodes that you could unlock. No, each mastery tree will not be different roles. Nope. And what I was describing earlier, if you're just tuning in, when we put out the dev diary about mastery, we included a graphic with that had like the three bars, right? And we did make a note on there that, you know, the visuals of that were subject to change because one of the other kind of approaches we were considering is more of a radial approach where instead of having these like three distinct bars or three distinct branches, you have kind of more of a freeform radial that you can kind of work your way in, you know, different directions and various things. Still with like those thematic kind of sections of the array. So for the warrior, for example, you'd still have kind of your bastion section, your commander section, your warlord section. But how, like, which direction you choose to go and, you know, what things from the other kind of parts of it that aren't directly related to where you're going do you still want to pull in, and some experimentation there about, you know, whatnot. It'll probably look a little bit more like a PoE skill tree, just not, but just more contained and like, I don't know, clear, manageable. Like it should still be really clear that like, this is kind of what this slice of the radial represents versus this slice versus this slice. And yeah, so yeah. Will we get info soon on what the master trees will be for the classes? Yes, that is coming soon. That is coming soon. Yeah, and we're gonna experiment a little bit with like how the respecs work, coin cost, like whether there's a cooldown on it. I don't know that we want to like quest gate it. I feel like that's just. I feel like that would just get tedious and not. Yeah. All right, are we ready to talk Fein Death? Plus, we're already planning on doing some quest unlocks for the techniques as well, for some of them. So we don't want to go overboard on that. And those are things you wouldn't need to do repeatedly either. Obviously, I mean, you would once you completed a technique quest to unlock a specific technique, you're obviously done with that quest. But yeah, I'd rather not go overboard on that. All right, let's talk Fein Death. Okay, we can revisit some of the mastery stuff here in a sec once we go through this, but I don't want to not do that. Oh, one sec. Okay. Let me pull up my... So, first of all, just so that you guys know, yes, necromancers will be getting Fein Death, and Dire Lords is something that we're considering. Fein Death for Dire Lord could end up being a thing, maybe, but it's still very much in the maybe category. But Necros for sure. And FD was in shambles when I played it last. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of walk through some of what my research has led me to with Fein Death, and then I want you guys to kind of help me fill in the gaps, okay? Because like I said at the beginning of the stream, there's not a whole lot of like clear information out there. Sony never came out and said, here are the formulas. You know, I've had some conversations with Steve about it, Steve Clover, and you know, it's just been a long time. So there's just kind of the collective memory of what Fein Death is and how it works, with a little bit of, there's some specific clues here and there along the way. So here's like, first, here's the first kind of thing I feel like I've found that is specific. So there was a patch note in 2004 on December 15th. It says the monk's Fein Death success rate has been improved. It was previously capped at 95% at 100 skill, and now it ramps up the success rate for higher skill levels. So that's one thing I've found as like historical evidence to say, okay, it seems likely that in classic era, because for those of us that are familiar with Fein Death, we knew that, you know, as soon as you really wanted to get it to that 100 skill, as soon as that skill said master, it's like it became like very reliable, and that seems to be because it had a 95% success rate. I need to go back and take a look specifically at our Fein Death code, but I'm not sure that we ever achieve a full 95% success rate. I'm not sure. But I do remember from experience, I remember that feeling pretty good. So that's one thing that needs to change, is just how, because I mean, Fein Death, when you first got Fein Death, it was, I mean, it like never worked. I mean, when in EverQuest, when you were first starting to use Fein Death, when you first got the skill at like level 17, I think, it would never work. And that's why, you know, getting to level 20 was kind of the turning point, because at level 20, that's when you could finally achieve 100 skill and hit that point. So that's the first thing we need to fix, is like how consistent Fein Death is. And what I think there's some other cool things we can do with it once you surpass that skill point, because right now it's not in like an EQ. Sorry guys, I'm jumping all over the place here, but an EQ at level 20 is when you reached 100 skill, which is when, classically speaking, when Fein Death kind of maxed out its effectiveness. So you hit level 20 long before max level, obviously, so you could enjoy that kind of max effectiveness Fein Death for, you know, much more of the game. Whereas in Pantheon, like your success rate is tied to your true like skill, meaning not until you get to level 50 in Pantheon can you fully max out your Fein Death success chance. So that's one tweak we want to make. Is that all tracking so far? Okay. Okay. Now, okay. Now, what role did NPC level play in the success roll? That's kind of the next part of the research. Pretty much across the board, the failure check of Fein Death is classified as a skill-based check, not a mob level like resist type system. So a successful Fein Death is based on the skill check. When it comes to like, did you actually successfully Fein Death? Has nothing to do with the mob level. Where mob level came into play was in the memory forget behavior. So I want to stop there long enough to give you guys a chance to like really process that. And what that means is like, even if you're fighting something that's deep red, or something that's deep red is attacking you, you're level 30 and there's like a level 45 NPC, your chance of successfully feigning death and like ending aggression from that NPC had nothing to do with the NPC's level. It was just the Fein Death check. Where the mob level came into play is on the memory forget mechanic. What input am I looking for from you guys? I'm just kind of, as I go through and kind of make these statements based on what I've been able to kind of piece together, that it sounds generally accurate. And if there's anybody that like played a monk or has like a lot of like experience with, you know, monk mechanics, that, you know, maybe he's chiming in and saying, oh, it didn't actually work like that or whatever. So the main things that we need to get working with Pantheon's Fein Death, number one is we need to get the skill up and the success rate more dialed in. That Fein Death should become much more effective and kind of reliable earlier in your skill progression of Fein Death, so you don't have to actually literally get to like max level before Fein Death feels like it's reliable. But the other part of it is we need to get the inherent risk in Fein Death. The risk in Fein Death was, there were a few things that I remember being risky. Number one, you had to time it properly, and the more NPCs that you had attacking you, because if you Fein Death, even if it was successful, if an NPC ability landed on you after you had feigned death, that hit would kind of reinstate the aggression. So you needed to try and time your Fein Death, where if there was a spellcaster or something attacking you, you need to try to time it where you wait to get hit and then flop, so that you don't end up re-aggroing the NPC. So that's one thing that we need to get working. Is this Pantheon or EQ? I want to capture, I feel like for Fein Death to exist, I want to capture as close as I can to what Fein Death was like in EQ for that specific mechanic as a baseline that we can start working with. Because currently our Fein Death is way too effective. It's way too reliable and powerful. And I feel like, you know, EverQuest definitely had a better risk. The mechanics worked better to create more of a sense of risk with it than we currently have. Yeah, well, that's the other side of it. Fein Death does fail way too much right now. So there's the failing side of Fein Death where, yes, it fails way too much, takes too long to get the skill up to a point where it stops failing so much. So we're going to fix that. But what we need to dial in is the risk that comes from NPCs actually seeing through it or forgetting you or whatnot. So here's what I have. You guys can sanity check this. If you successfully feign death and you don't have any incoming damage or spells or any impacts coming in, then the NPCs stop attacking you and they will just stand there for a random period of time. You know, they'll have kind of this time frame. There's probably a minimum amount of time that they wait, but then I'm like, well, I feel like I remember times in EQ where they would like immediately start walking back or really close to it, and then sometimes where they'd wait a really long time. So it seemed pretty random. But the range of time could be pretty long. What I found really interesting was there was actually a reference. I can't even remember where I found it. So when it came to like the forget conditions. So basically, if you feign death and you feign death successfully, but you stand up before the NPC has truly forgotten you or truly reset by returning to its spawn point, then NPCs can re-engage. So if you stood up, even if the NPC was outside of like re-aggro radius, they could still re-engage if they hadn't actually reset, like if they hadn't forgotten you. There was talk about so level 35, I think once NPCs were level 35 and above, they had to fully reset before they would forget about you. Is that correct? There's mention of a silent critical success where there were certain cases where you could stand up before the NPC had fully reset and it still wouldn't aggro. But this was like, it wasn't articulated to the player at all. And I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that there were a couple of mentions of something like that where there was this chance that, yeah. But it was kind of like if you waited until they fully returned to their spawn point, like if you could see where their spawn point was and you waited that full time, then there was like 100% chance they wouldn't re-aggro. You never had to wait, even on level 35 plus. Oh, you just feign death again. You just do a second feign death. Okay. Yeah. They could forget on the way back. 2 timers, 1 for walk back, 1 for forget. Yeah, there's mention as well of a periodic roll that they do to see if they forget while they're in that stage. At some point, they added a message as well. Your, what was it? Like, so-and-so has, the enemy has completely forgotten about you or whatever. Higher level mobs are more likely to remember. I think for level 35 plus NPCs, it was more about, basically feign on cooldown until they forgot about you. If you were trying to get away from something, like if you were trying to split, then, obviously you're going to feign until you get the kind of like walk back RNG that allows, a puller to come and pull it and split them. Or if you're trying to split naturally, then you'd keep doing the same thing. But the idea, I think, is that you would feign as many times as you needed to get that critical feign or whatever that allowed it to reset before it got back. But that seems to be kind of like what is implied from what I could find, is that there was NPCs lower than level 35, pretty much, that critical feign, as long as you were out of range of them, like if they had walked back to the point where you could stand up and you weren't going to re-aggro from proximity, that they pretty much, it was kind of like a guaranteed thing. It was very unlikely that, they would re-engage, whereas 35 plus, it was very likely that they would re-engage. And so you just would keep feigning until you got that kind of silent critical roll. Does that track? I felt like there may have been a bit of a range, a range component to their walk back range as well. Like, were you directly fighting them in their face, or did you jump before you got to camp 20 meters away? Yeah. Yep. I know, right? Yeah. So let's talk about, how we want this to work in Pantheon. These are the ways that it worked in EQ to the best of our memory and from our experience. How do we want Pantheon to work in EQ? I'm actually going to have another quick bio. Think about that. Let's process that when I come back, and we'll try to get a kind of a plan in place for how we want to do this. And we're back. Sorry about that. Okay. What do we got here? Fox behind the box? Yes, it will. It will. Pantheon pathing can be very interesting indeed. Social aggro made EQ much better than a lot of games. What about EQ social aggro? Because you said visibility, you said, I say bring back social aggro, it increases the risk and need for skill, but we have social aggro. Here's where I think Pantheon can improve Feign Death. 1. Improve Feign Death success chance at lower levels. 2. Increase the variance when mobs return to their spawn. Currently, mobs almost always go back within a second or two, and higher level mobs should tend to go back later. Number 3. Reduced chance, but non-zero, that a mob re-aggroes if it is walking away. You're not within its line of sight. It's not facing you. Yep. Number 4. Very high chance, potentially 100%, that a mob re-aggroes if you're in its line of sight, including facing you. 5. Clear aggro instantly on full reset at spawn. 6. If at any point you stand up and re-aggro, mobs should re-assist appropriately according to normal aggro rules. So let's stop on that one real quick, because I'm getting the sense, and what I feel like I'm hearing here is that if let's pretend, let's pretend the character that I've got on screen right now, let's pretend this is a monk. Let's pretend, these two guards here are NPCs. I'm pulling them both. And they're attacking me, they're chasing me, and I'm running, and I flop right here. Successful Feign Death. These two enemies are standing right here. They start walking back. I wait till they get, about right here. I stand up, and I use my technique on one of them. Are we saying that in that scenario, the other one will continue walking back like nothing happened? Okay, that's it. That's a huge problem. That is a huge problem. Okay. Okay. So yeah, there's definitely something going on in the state that they get into when you feign death and they're going back. It's like they're in a different state where they're not behaving under normal social aggro rules, because social aggro is working in the sense that were I to pull one of two NPCs that are in reasonable proximity, I'm going to get both of them. They're both going to pull. But because of whatever their post Fein Death state is, it's like they're not doing that check. Yeah, I think it's tapping into something to do with the leashing that is keeping them from yeah. It seems like it. It seems like right now they go into a leash state where they don't obey, you know, their basic social aggro rules. So that's definitely something that we need to fix. And then, Glor, if you're number 7, possibly most important, no chained aggro from duration effects that the mobs did not see cast while knowing you are still alive. I.e. a hot cast before you pull, or while you're feign death and mobs think you're dead, should not aggro the healer when you stand up. Potentially more to come. Okay, but this one we really need to think about carefully. Because one of the things that EQ made EQ different is that you really didn't have any periodic effects, beneficial effects. So when you have a hot should, I'm gonna pop over to EP so I can see if I can see this fog issue you guys have been talking about. When you have a hot ticks are like any other form of healing in that they are generating threat. If a tank is engaged in combat and I heal that tank, I am generating threat on that target. So we're gonna have to figure out whether to make some kind of a special case. Yeah, well, I don't know if it was Canark. Was it Canark or was it Velius that clerics got celestial something? Celestial light, celestial healing, something? It was Canark? Well, let's look it up. This is always my go-to. It was like in the 30s or 40s. Celestial healing. There it is. Level 44. See, Velius. I thought it was. I was pretty sure it was Velius because I remember using it for the first time in Great Divide. I don't think they got. Maybe they did get it though higher level. Maybe I'm thinking of a lower level version. That's probably what it is. What was it called? Celestial Elixir. Oh, heal over time right there. Celestial Elixir, Canark. Maybe there was an earlier Celestial one too. Maybe the Velius one was just they had decided to introduce a lower level version. But at any rate, it does look like they did have a heal over time in Canark. But the point there being, like, if a monk flopped and you cast you know, this hot, would a tick of that hot jump on you threat wise? I feel like it would. Like, I feel like that's logical. You know? If I, as a mob, am attacked by Puller 01 that is full health, how do I know that Healer 01 casts a hot on them? Healer 1 casts a hot on Puller while I think he's dead. That I didn't see. How do I know? Well, okay, so... Yes. But that's one of those situations where does the game logic... Does it matter more that the game logic is consistent? Or is it about creating a special case with Feign Death? Because the problem with that is Feign Death could be used, and again, one of the arguments in my mind for not doing it that way is because you... I mean, that you just make Feign Death such a powerful recovery mechanic because you can just essentially cast, you know, preload. Ah, the green fog. That's what I came here to see. Yes. In all of its greenishness. Let's head over to... Let's get rid of Pet for a second. Let's head over to the knoll. Ooh, that is really... And there was some comment about elevation, too. Oh. Oh. Not gonna lie though, that's kind of sick. like crossing into that shadow line, that is kind of cool. We've got a couple of other lighting updates coming out reasonably in the reasonably near future that is gonna, like, lighting wise, things are gonna be looking really, really cool soon. So yeah, I definitely feel the heaviness of this, but I guess that is really cool though. I love that. This looks terrible. I agree. This, whatever's going on here, looks kind of rough. But I'm thinking in terms of like being able to dial these things in, and then having like... I don't know, that sense of like true dark to light transition line like that's really cool. But yeah, that's I don't know what's going on there. I thought it was a wall too for a second, especially because people were saying earlier that they were able to see nameplates through walls. I saw these dim nameplates and I was like, ah, that must be one of those wall places. That must have been one of them wall places. Ouch. Yeah, there's definitely some interesting... The fog is doing some interesting stuff in this zone. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Oof. Look at that. Sorry, I won't make you guys look at that anymore. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the volume that this place is inside of, playing with the outside lighting. Very interesting. It's one of them fall places. Yeah, I can take a look at Sorhirith as well. Okay. Yeah, Glorf, that one, the hot tick, like threat transfer, that's the only one in that list that gives me pause. Guys, where am I? What are the plans for the big city across the bridge from Thronefast? That is the city of Thronefast. That is, the plans for that is to be the human capital city. And really the largest of the capital cities. All right. Oh my. Okay. Well. Living on the edge. So, is it missing in the client, or is it just repositioned? Yeah, and like rescaled, shrunk. Interesting. Okay. Oh yeah, so here definitely I haven't. Oh, look at that. Interesting. Does that show up for you guys too? The ancient hoverboard. Yeah. Interesting. Oh, there's so many more things to build out in the city. It's exciting to think about. But yeah, it's definitely blown out. Similar issue across the board with the lighting, the overall lighting changes, needing to go back through and get everything dialed in a little bit. Actually, yeah, hoverboard / surfboard for Badia de Cara. That's right. That's right. Change your graphics to TAA. Yeah, I'll check that next time I'm in there. I think it stuck. I think I've been in the editor since the last patch, so I'm pretty sure I've already changed those, but I'll check next time. There's a little friend right there. Wow. Okay. Just gonna kind of double check, make sure nothing else was affected. Platform lattice ring. Okay, so yeah, it looks like that's only used 3 times in here. In this scenario, it was fine because it was already just like whatever it's scaled to. So I wonder if I saw that somebody did a bake of Wild's End either earlier today or sometime over the weekend. So I'm wondering if, like, if we set this back to and then okay. No. Interesting. All right. Yeah, I'll have to have a chat with whoever did that last bake, and we'll figure it out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the most recent Wild's End bake, which happened like today. That's my guess. That's my guess. But yeah, like, so let's take, it's been a minute, so I just want to see, do we have like lights specifically inside of these guys? No. Are they just free floating lights? Oh, we do. We do have, wait. Okay, it's just the nugget? Huh. Oh, that old amber nugget. It's the amber nugget. It's always the amber nugget. Oh, yeah, yeah. These are... Yep. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so that means this isn't being properly replaced because it's inside of this prefab. Hmm. I think some of it's coming down to the emission strength as well, probably. Yeah. This is going to take a little time to tweak. I don't think we're going to do that on stream either, at least not on this stream. So I need to get I need to coordinate making sure that more than one people aren't working in here. So, but yeah. So you were saying something about this material, right? Like feeling like it was kind of... shiny. Oh, yeah. this. Okay. Oh, that's funny. Hold on one sec, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me get out of this environment. We're not gonna get into that now. Let's real quick. Let's revisit Feign Death. So here's kind of my current list of things to do with Feign Death. Number one, we need to improve the way skill ups work with Feign Death, achieving a relatively reliable success rate earlier in the skill progression. That's number one. Number two, we need to address the social aggro behavior once once an NPC or a group of NPCs get to the point where they're going to start walking back, or after a successful feign, they need to maintain their social aggro dynamics at that point, so that you have to actually time and wait and look for the right positioning of NPCs to re-engage one of them, because they will socially aggro if they're, within proximity of each other, kind of thing. So we need to get that. We need to get proximity aggro and social aggro working the way it does outside of feign dynamics. And then the third one is going to be and this one is still a little bit more undefined. So maybe we, because that chance that NPCs have to remember you just by standing up. So not even you re-engaging with them. No, that's what I said, Black Fox. Like, I've talked to Steve about this, and it's not, he doesn't remember everything verbatim. Yeah. We need to think of, how we want to approach that. Like, there being a chance for them to remember you after you stand up, causing you to need to, maybe re-feign death again. I think those three things And for mobs to engage anything on their path home. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, if you're running by, that's right. Because I'm assuming right now that's what makes it so easy, because then anybody else can just come up and pull one of the 2 mobs or one of the 8 mobs while they're all walking back, and none of the other ones will aggro. Yeah, that's okay. Let me ask you this too, guys. What makes the Enchanter in Pantheon a better puller than what the Enchanter in EQ is capable of doing? Like, why didn't you see more people pulling on Enchanters in EQ? Curious about that. Pacify resist equal to aggro. I see what you did there, Denox. EQ enchanters were usually busy keeping a powerful charmed mob under control and didn't need the added distraction. That was a nice plug for charm. Okay. Yes, charm is coming in the spring. The spring. Oh, you pulled all the time in EQ. Okay. 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 No. Concealment and awareness are still definitely stats that are used for stealth. I don't know if it makes sense to tie that into Feign Death, but they do definitely still exist and will be, better itemized and more, part of the game loop. Is there going to be passive combat skill progression, like level 18 dual wield that gets better as you level? Yes, but not for everything. So dual wield will probably not have a passive skill, just because of the way we've designed dual wield. So in EQ, dual wield was like a proc chance essentially, whereas in Pantheon, dual wield is actually it's the ability to wield a weapon in your offhand, governed by that weapon's damage and delay as it is in your main hand, just with a damage penalty for the offhand. So once you're able to dual wield, you'll be able to do it just according to the weapon's own stats, damage and delay, as opposed to being a proc chance. So in that regard, there's no need for like a dual wield skill to increase your proc chance. We're considering some things with skills like that. So dual wield, we could potentially do something like an offhand damage penalty reduction through dual wield skill and stuff like that. But it's also possible we might, just have it be what it is. We do want to have like a place in the spell book for certain like innate traits or innate, things like that you have as a class, so it doesn't show up in the skill list. It's just something that you have, like you can dual wield. There doesn't need to be like a skill representation for that. But then things like shield, shields is something that we're going to be adding skill for. Dodge, block, parry, these things. Those will be, skill related and whatnot. Oh yeah, Power Weasel. We have a lot of plans for improving the spell book and the way that stuff is presented to you guys. Double attack, triple attack, double backstab. I don't know that we're gonna have double attack and triple attack as skills. Double backstab is probably gonna be a thing, and then other similar things like that. But I don't think there's gonna be like a passive double attack skill. Hey Joppa, what's mastery, and could you give an example or two? Yeah, I could. We did a dev diary, like a dev blog on mastery not too long ago. That would be good to read if you're curious about the system. It's essentially a form of alternate advancement, alternate progression for your character that is I would say, if you're familiar with like EverQuest alternate advancement, mastery is a little bit more like thematic and defining than that. So it's kind of a hybrid in a way. It's kind of a hybrid between like a more traditional talent tree type system and then like an alternate advancement type system. There are definitely a fusion of those two things. But it's designed to kind of give you options of how you want to build your character's like your class expression, and give you a little bit of freedom within that to kind of either lean into, we've used the warrior example all day with, you could lean into kind of the mainline purist kind of form of the warrior, which is obviously the tank role and kind of beefing up your tankiness and your defensiveness to the max. You have the commander kind of theme inside of the warrior, which is their banners, their formations, their mobility with things like charge and leaps, positional type things. So that part of the mastery array, gives you the ability to lean into those things and kind of amplify those abilities and whatnot. And then you have the warlord section, which is kind of your weapon master, more offensive form, your shouts, kind of more of the that warlord theme and vibe of the warrior that you can lean into as well. So it's really just comes down to how you choose to spend your points and what aspect of the warrior you want to amplify the most. Dual banners. Tanks are now DPS, so wizard will be tanks. No. Yeah, Denox, I'm not necessarily ruling something like that out. That's something that we might play with. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So I know, so we've done a lot of chatting today. We haven't done as much hands-on stuff today, but that's okay because we've had a lot to discuss and a lot of good discussion came from it. But it's getting to be about that time. And I think they're probably going to call it for today. But like I said, guys, the reason that we did what we did with the AMA and some of the answers that we gave were specifically designed to kind of get this ball rolling, get some discussion going. Yes, Mastery will be in spring. So please, like, continue the conversation. A lot of what inspired me to want to do this discussion today is because of all the chatter in Discord about it. And I hope that, you know, what we've talked about today kind of helps at least direct some of that conversation. Obviously, you know, if you've got, you know, strong feelings about it, like, give the feedback. You know, I'm looking forward to hopefully reading more discussion about it. Mastery is coming up in the spring. Obviously, it's going to be part of, you know, what you guys see on your on the PTR when the time comes, so you guys can, you know, start getting a feel for it. And yeah, just keep that feedback flowing. Keep it flowing. Okay. I know for sure that I will be back with you guys on Wednesday this week. We'll see, you know, we'll see any additional streams other than that. But until then, I don't know that the weather has fully, completely settled itself down. So stay safe, stay warm. What was that? Okay. Yep. Stay safe, stay warm. I will catch you guys again on Wednesday. My friends, as always, if you do end up catching this on YouTube, like, comment, that stuff goes a long way to kind of helping these streams stay on people's, like, radar. So I always appreciate that. But yeah, we'll pick it up again definitely on Wednesday. And until then, take care. And I will see you guys very soon. Onward and upward, my friends. Adios.